First of all, I think he's the first and maybe the only listener to compare Westworld to Superman 3.
Was Superman 3 the Richard Pryor computer, or was this Bizarro Lightning Superman? Which one was it?
I think this is the Superman where Superman gets drunk and possibly rapes someone? Welcome back to Shat on TV Westworld Edition, the companion podcast to the hit HBO television series Westworld. My name is Roger Roper, also known as The Raj, and alongside my two co-hosts, Gene Lyons.
Hello, Miss Lady.
And Big D, Dick Ebert.
Good evening.
This is the episode, boys, where we jump spurs first into a pool of Westworld viewer and listener email. And I do have to say, we have consistently been getting not only a lot of listener email and theories, but a lot of really good ones, boys.
Yeah, I'm glad that a lot of people seem to be as crazy as we are, that I don't feel alone in my madness. So thank you for joining us on our journey down this crazy hole.
So I thought we'd switch it up a little bit. I thought last week's introductory podcast of the Westworld Telegraph was absolutely fantastic. There were a lot of great theories, a lot of things that might still hold up based on episode 4. But we keep getting more and more emails. So what I thought we'd do, guys, is I've highlighted the best portions of emails, because some emails we get are like 3 pages long. Some of them are just, a quick 2, 3, 4 sentences. But in the interest of time, I've picked out the best portions of those long viewer emails, and we'll respond to those. But if you want to see the full emails, you want to see the full theories, navigate to our website, shatontv.com. There's a comment section on each listener feedback and listener telegraph that you can join into the conversation. Big D, you're in charge of the Westworld Telegraph. Why don't you go ahead and get that started, and we will read the first telegraph. All right, our first viewer listener email comes from Kat with a K. It's entitled, Maze was built by Arnold as a Turing test. She writes, all right, here's my best guess at the happenings of Westworld. I think the maze was built by Arnold as a Turing test. If a host passes the test, he or she can be considered conscious, and they can leave their post and become free. It also might imply that the park must shut down and return to the glory days of their research lab because of the moral implications that this test brings up. Arnold's handshake agreement with Ford was that he would make all the hosts aware of the maze, but that they would have to first choose to find it, visit it, and solve it on their own. Because Ford is so confident that his creations will never do something they aren't programmed to do, he allows it. Similarly, Arnold is equally confident that sooner or later, enough small variations in the code will lead to an evolved host that makes the first choice to be free. Perhaps Ford, after so many years, secretly wishes it would have happened by now and has added the Reveries code in order to give it the tiniest of nudges. Oh man, I could go on, but I think this email is already too long. Absolutely love your podcast. Thanks for feeding my obsession and making my commute bearable. That's Kat with a K from San Francisco. So she says basically that the host will be considered fully conscious if they reach the end of the maze, and this is something that Arnold originally programmed, but Ford put the governors on. What do you guys think about this theory?
To me, it's an interesting point. We've discussed whether or not the maze is a physical thing or a circuitry thing, but really never discussed the purpose. Why would someone, design it? Is it there for entertainment's sake on the part of the guests, or is it there as a failsafe, or is it there as some sort of an additional level that was put in by Arnold or by Ford? So this is an interesting theory. And if you follow along that theory, one of the really fascinating parts of it is, imagine this, for the maze to be useful in this sense, in the sense of it being a Turing test, what would you need to solve it? Not only would you need to find it and to engage with it, but you need a host. So for a human to go to it alone makes no sense at all, because if it's a Turing test. So now look at it this way. Each human's got their horse, right? So you've got the man in black. He's got Lawrence. Say, presumably, you've got Bernard or Dr. Ford with Delores. So you would see that these pairings of each human with their chosen one, their champion that they're going to try to drive to this maze to have it happen. Why else? We talked about the man in black having Lawrence along with him. Why else would he have him with him?
Well, I said on the cast, you need a fun sidekick. It's not an adventure without a compadre on your side.
I've got 2 fun sidekicks, and sometimes I think it'd be a lot easier to go it alone.
Giggle, giggle, giggle. Well, I think interesting theory. Are we led to believe it's been there since the beginning of the park? And if that's the case, that was some foresight. That was really some planning. I could see where this could possibly be the case, and you would need a day where you'd be waiting for the host to actually desire the will for freedom, to actually become aware enough to realize that there's something else going on. Possibly it was put in place with the idea that at that current time they were not able to advance that far, but one day it was possible. Interesting theory. I think it's a bit far stretch, and for me that's saying a lot, but who knows? It's a good thought.
Thanks, Kat, for writing in. Our next telegraph comes from Sandy. It's entitled, "Is it possible that Logan is the man in black and William's conscience gets traveled into Teddy?" Dear hosts, and she says that with a little winky emoticon face, and I actually didn't realize this, but our email address is hosts@shatontv.com, and I think we set that up before we even knew that the word hosts was going to be used in Westworld, Big D.
That's very good. I didn't even think
I didn't even recognize that. That's awesome.
Oh,
anyway, Sandy goes on. "Thanks for taking the time to explore Westworld. I greatly enjoy listening to the theories and appreciate all the investigating that's being done. The last Telegraph mail reading presented a few angles that led me to a different theory. Going with the concept of a multiple timeline format, is it possible that Logan is the man in black and William's conscience is transferred into Teddy? I have seen at least one article about this and would love to hear your takes on it." And she goes on to give her arguments for each. "Logan, as the man in black, is more favorable to me because their traits line up. They're both wild, no-holds-barred characters. They dress similarly, from the black coat and the vest to the fully buttoned-up collar and similar tie knot. Logan has been coming to the park longer than William has and has a better grasp of what the game is about. He has no qualms about fully engaging with the robots, from having sex to them to shooting them. He doesn't bat an eye. Logan also comes from money, something that the man in black seems to share in common. Is it possible that Logan goes through something devastating, such as losing William to Westworld, and decides to delve deeper into the world to find an answer to what question I don't know yet? William, on the other hand, seems more similar to Teddy. They are both sincere and good-willed, prefer trail adventures to rape and killing, and interactions with Delores is in the same manner. They both wear plaid shirts with unbuttoned open collar and non-black colors. I personally don't think William's character would ever be capable of treating robots in the manner that the man in black does. I believe William cares too much for them and that this will get him to deep trouble later on. Perhaps in the future, Teddy possesses William's character conscience, but is controlled and therefore can only replay William's hopeless romance day after day. This would bring extra meaning to the man in black's line to Teddy, 'You are not the man you think you are.' Just food for thought. Thanks again, Sandy." Guys, what do you think about this theory?
My head hurts.
I can get into it in the sense that the matching of the traits certainly makes more sense. But I think a lot of us, it has almost become the common parlance of Westworld fans to talk about these downloaded consciousness, that people's consciousness is being pushed into hosts. And again, from a standpoint of anything we know about Westworld, there's not a lot of evidence for it, in the sense that we haven't seen much of this going on. The technology has not been discussed. It seems like something that would be pretty, common knowledge if they were doing it. And also, how would it benefit the park? How would it benefit Delos? How would it benefit anything that that Dr. Ford is trying to do. I just don't see. I always try to go to motivation and go, who would be motivated to do this and why?
Yeah, I think the whole transfer of conscious, or using almost the human soul or the mind as the transferring in as the intelligence of the host, I could only see that happening as the jumping off point. I could see the park in the beginning hitting a certain wall where they couldn't advance any further. And maybe that led Arnold to his disappearance, that he realized that there was only so far that man could go creating artificial intelligence, and he realized he needed to, download his own consciousness to jumpstart it, and that he is the core of the code that runs most of the intelligence. I keep asking myself, in the world that Westworld is, and in the show, how is this technology not worldwide? Everyone who comes to the park is amazed by the host. They've never seen anything like it. How do you keep that technology contained and only within the park? And I think there would have to be something proprietary, something advanced that no one else had done. So I could see consciousness being the kicking off point. I don't see that they're continuing to do it, though.
I mean, to me, I was on a flight this weekend to Nashville, and on the way there, I had this choice. By the way, Delta, way to go with all the movies and stuff for free. Nice. I like it. I'm a big Southwest guy, but Delta, I'm really impressed with this. Anyway, so I'm watching these movies. And, of course, I've been wanting to see – I've been into the new Star Trek movies for like the last 3 or 4. And Star Trek Beyond, I haven't seen that one. So I put it on, and I go, did an idiot write this? It's like basic principles of science are kind of just bumped into each other, and they're like, yeah, that would sort of work. Like if you launch a starship off a cliff, it's going to reach terminal velocity and therefore be able to lift off. Like it doesn't work that way. It doesn't have aerodynamics. What the hell?
Wait, you're telling me the Beastie Boys cannot defeat an entire armada of spaceship? I don't get that.
The last Star Trek should have been renamed Fast and the Furious Star Trek, or Fast and the Furious Enterprise.
Exactly.
It was written by Simon Pegg, actually.
Was it seriously?
Yeah, it was.
Yeah, Fast in the Federation or something. But yeah, it was terrible. And, I just feel like when we start to kind of throw these ideas around, it's like it's cool from a storytelling perspective, but then you got to think about the fact that they take such pains to make this show plausible from the corporate level, from the financial level, from the scientific level, that, and something that I noticed the other day actually is it's also done so artistically in the fact that I feel like all of us believe that there are actually humans and hosts on this show when we're watching it. And you got to realize, like, there's so little effects done to show us that they're robots. We just believe that they're robots. It's just people talking to other people as far as the actual show goes. And yet somehow we're like, oh, yeah, that's a robot for sure. I can tell by the way, whatever. No, it's just a person. They're all people. And so, it's all so nuanced that this seems like such a huge, huge leap.
Yeah, another thing when we see the entire, servicing department, have we ever seen any mechanical, apparatus? Everything seems biological. The hosts are comprised mostly of synthetic muscle. The entire, undercarriage of the hosts seems to be pretty much the same anatomy of a human being. They keep referencing wet works. I haven't seen anything that is synthetic. It looks all like it's biological grown matter, which would make me think that possibly the brain is the same way. The wood chopper, he didn't have a metal skull. That looked like to be a synthetic bone, something that was able to be destroyed. There might be more of an organic base to them than we think.
Most of these theories are coming from the fact that on the website, if you go to discoverwestworld.com, there's a disclaimer that Delos Westworld owns all of your DNA when you go to the park. So that's where this idea is coming from, that the fact that they're cloning these hosts from humans that have visited or at one point were human and have died. And it's no secret also that in some of the sequels and television shows, in the original, the Beyond Westworld series and then Future World, that was the whole plot of Delos, is that they were replacing humans with hosts. And honestly, I think it's a little too far-fetched right now for me to believe that consciousness is being transferred. I don't think that we've seen any of that technology right now. And personally, for me, I don't believe that we're on alternate timelines. I don't believe that Logan is Man in Black. But that's just me, guys. All right, our next, thank you so much again, Sandy, for writing in. Our next email comes from Carrie. She says, I just want to be the one to say I called it. Need I say spoilers? All the Westworld dominoes in my head have all cascaded. One post asked the meaning of Walter, the glitching bandit, pouring milk on a dead host and saying, not gonna die this time, Arnold. Arnold was Ford's partner who died in a, quote, accident. Arnold was a host, the first. Ford teamed up with the AI he had created. Arnold gained sentience, but with horror, realized ignorance is bliss and found a way to end his consciousness. Pure conjecture for this next bit, but it's possible that Arnold's accident involved the milky fluid we see in the host creation vats. Hence, Walter pouring the milk and saying, not going to die this time, Arnold, and ain't nothing going to kill me. Walter's still reverie glitching, memories of the other hosts who have killed him, possible a memory of Arnold's death. After the accident, Ford was able to salvage some of the parts of Arnold, which was resurrected, like Lazarus, from the dead and was used to create Bernard. Bernard is a host. Bernard is Arnold. Stay with me here. Show is hitting the Eden myth allegory hard. Snake and snake's tattoos, fruit of the tree of knowledge, sentience, Dolores, the original, equals Eve, but I still haven't answered who is the Adam. Bernard is Adam. He was the first. Dolores was the second. If the show parallels the Eden myth, perhaps Bernard created her by giving up a part of himself, Adam's rib. Also made her less sentient because ignorance is a bliss. Pretty fucked up. God, Ford, creates man, Bernard, Arnold, and man creates woman, Arnold, Dolores. The mere fact that I just coined the term creation vats earlier in the post leads me to believe I'm on the right track. The show writers are practically spelling it out for us, but they're also keeping us busy with lots of side quests. Nah, I'm not even going to conjecture about the Man in Black management or where the future seasons will go from here. Brain melting, side note, working title, Westworld Dominoes in my head. The Latin translation of domino is presence, eerie. I'm sure others have figured this out. I haven't combined the threads. P.S. Naked and unashamed host, very Eden. Also, Charlie was the second host created. This comes from Carrie. Basically, as I'm reading this email, all I can envision is A Beautiful Mind when Russell Crowe is just like putting all of his crazy theories on a window with a marker. That's how Carrie wrote this email and how I imagine her watching Westworld each week. Guys, your thoughts?
Yes, Carrie sees in shapes and colors. There's like in A Beautiful Mind where she's working this.
Yeah, so here's the problem I have with all of that is, I like to go to the source material, right? I like to go to what we know, what's actually said on the show, and I know sometimes that could be misleading. They could be trying to put us just down the wrong path. But again, it's really important in literature and television to go back and go, okay, I have this idea, and we've been accused of it in podcast reviews, which, by the way, if you haven't written us a review, please do on iTunes. And you get that idea that people want to see what they want to see. They're going to come up with an idea, then make all the facts match it. Man in Black is a very clear conversation with Armistice. Man in Black is a guy who's in the know. He seems very matter of fact. And he says, then Arnold went and broke his own rule. He died right here in the park, except I believe he had one story left to tell, a story with real stakes, real violence. You could say I'm here to honor his legacy, and I think your tattoo is the next piece of the puzzle. Now, to me, again, when you talk about a guy like that, you're not talking about a host. You're talking about a real person. And on top of that, again, if Ford had the ability at that time to create Arnold, who is this AI who is capable of creating on his own even and being an equal in the creation of Westworld, it just seems like that's a leap ahead of everything else that was being created at the time. Just doesn't add up to me.
Thanks for the email, Carrie. Keep them coming in. Really loved kind of like that crazy, beautiful mind email that that you wrote. Our next one comes from Brazil. It's from Eduardo. Brazil is also where the Man in Black, the actor who plays Hector, is from. Is that right?
Yes, he's quite dreamy.
Yes.
Or they would say gustoso.
That's Adam's favorite.
Oh, I'm going to cut that. That sounded
Eduardo writes, "Hi guys, sorry about my bad English. I'm from Brazil. I have 2 theories I'd like to share with you. Be prepared. Number 1, Bernard is Arnold. Again, another Bernard is Arnold truther. Years ago, Arnold died and Dr. Ford implemented his mind on a robot body. Now, in like the Fight Club movie, the Arnold part of Bernard's brain is awake, but not 100% of the time. He now has 2 personalities. Do you remember when Bernard asked Dolores about 2 versions of her? What if Bernard was talking without knowing about himself? Second theory, the lunatic followers of Wyatt are guests. They were shot but weren't killed. That's what is original about Ford's new narrative. The roles are inverse. That's it for now. Thanks for the excellent show, Eduardo." Guys, another Bernard is Arnold theorist, and the crazies of the Wyatt gang are actually guests, not hosts. What do we think about that?
I like the fact that Eduardo told us to be prepared. He was telling us that his theory was coming. Be prepared in the translation. I cannot see that Wyatt's gang are humans. Granted, Stubbs has a difficult time tracking stray hosts. If anything, they really would have the park contained from. You're charging $40,000 a day. Disney isn't letting one of their back gates be open and have the locals come walk in for free. The only answer is they are hosts that are either part of this new narrative or that have found a way to circumvent the natural response to bullets for hosts, or they're wearing some kind of body armor. But I don't see any way that they're humans who've come into the park.
I don't believe that the Wyatt gang are guests, but I do believe that Bernard is Arnold. And one of the clues that I picked up on is the way that Dr. Ford says Barnard. It's almost like he's saying Arnold, like Barnard old. I don't know. That's just one of my theories. But I'm definitely on the Bernard is Arnold train.
Well, people keep saying Bernard is Arnold, this person's Arnold. Is it just possible that the base code that runs all of them was somehow, before we had mentioned, what was it, Kate, or was it Carrie, with the Garden of Eden and Adam giving up a piece of his rib?
Yep.
To me, it's the most plausible that the base code that runs all of the hosts was that piece of Adam's rib. That is some form of Arnold's consciousness that is running them all. It's not that you downloaded Arnold into Bernard, you downloaded him into someone else. In that way, Arnold is part of all of them.
But what's the vehicle there? That's the thing I keep getting back to is we keep saying that, but it's like, how does that happen? And that's what's frustrating for me is that, it's like saying like, well, they went to the moon. Well, how'd they get there? Well, they got in a cardboard box that looked like a rocket and they went, it's like, yeah, you can have a lot of convenient story, developments, but how did he do it? Like it doesn't make any sense. They've demonstrated no technology capable of doing it. And if so, they would be effing millionaires because all they'd be doing is spending all their time putting dying people into new bodies.
Well, let's compare the 2 parks that we've seen. 30 years ago, it was all animatronics, all metal, all traditional robotics. Yet somehow today, it is a full 180. Everything is biological. We've not seen any kind of computer circuitry. It is a complete change. So we've seen that they've made an advance that we can't even comprehend.
So right now it's 2016. I want to take you back 30 years ago to a little time called 1986. We didn't have cellular phones. We didn't have hybrid cars. We didn't have the internet at our disposal. We didn't have GPS, for common use. 30 years, if you go late into another century ahead, 30 years, the amount of technological advance you make in 30 years are going to be astounding. It's exponential growth. It's not linear growth. I think it's perfectly plausible in 30 years you can go from, kind of clumsy robots to fully, biological beings. Totally. Without magic and without putting Bernard into somebody or Arnold into somebody.
Yeah, I just want to say that I also don't believe that we actually went to the moon. I believe that that was recorded and directed by Stanley Kubrick. Thanks, Eduardo, and keep the emails coming from Brazil. Our next email gets pretty deep, and Gene, as the literary genius of the podcast, you're going to have to be our expert on this one. It's from Christine, and she's comparing Westworld to Aldous Huxley's Brave New World. She writes, I love your podcast and the attention you include with viewer input. I'd love for you to spend some time exploring all the literary allusions that add meaning to the show, but I think that you could probably spend a full episode on just the connections between Huxley's Brave New World and Westworld. Brave New World is about a future dystopian England where everyone pursues pleasure at the cost of human connections. Humans are created in labs, programmed to pursue a life of happiness and pleasure, and to avoid emotional pain. One of the main characters is a man named Bernard, whose role it is to serve as sort of a conscience. He represents the reader, who is both fascinated by the world but also disgusted by it. Bernard gets himself into some trouble when, after a visit to the Savage Lands, an American Indian reservation in the Southwest, he brings back a man, John, who was born in the Savage Lands to a woman who was left behind during a trip. John grew up with one book, a collection of Shakespeare's plays, and this guides his life. The title of the novel is itself an allusion to a quote from The Tempest, "O brave new world that has such people in it." John attempts to make the people of modern society see the dangers of technology in controlling people in the population, but they ignore him and he runs away. He becomes a public spectacle and people follow him to a lighthouse where they begin an orgy. John commits suicide and the society continues on. In this world, no one prays or believes in God, but they do swear to a sort of deity. Both surface and deeper connections are fairly obvious, and I think that they also provide a pretty solid roadmap of what to expect in this show. I agree with you and many of your listeners in that Westworld Ford is a type of god. Whether he's real or not doesn't really matter. Ford is the creator of this world. I think that this novel also reveals Westworld's Bernard's weakness. He is going to humiliate Ford and or the Delos Corporation, either intentionally or not, in pursuit of trying to find some deeper truth. As I've been watching the first few episodes, I've been trying to figure out which character is the John of Westworld. It might possibly be the Man in Black, but I think it's more likely to be Peter Abernathy, who, in a previous version, was a Shakespeare troupe member, and I think that we're going to see something come alive in cold storage at the hands of Peter. Besides, the actor is too good to be relegated to one episode, right? Thanks again for your work. It's fun to listen to your initial Instacast, followed by the podcast later in the week. Christine from Iowa. Guys, what do we think about this? I mean, I did not read the book, Brave New World. How about you? How about you guys?
Yeah, this is a juicy one. This is really good. I've pointed out the ties to Paradise Lost. I pointed out the ties to Shakespeare. Brave New World I hadn't considered, and largely any dystopian book. I mean, you could talk about W, and it's very similar there. But like the idea, a lot of that dystopian literature is going to have these common themes. But really interestingly enough, Raj, is not only is Bernard named Bernard, but Ford is actually Ford in A Brave New World. They instead of saying like Lord, like as in God, they say Ford as in Henry Ford. Like, so you've got a Bernard and a Ford, very, very closely related. I think there's some big tells there, and that is an excellent observation by Christine, tying those two things together.
Wow. Christine, thank you so much. You blew my mind. And Jane, I knew you would be the expert on this. So Christine, we'll see how that plays out as the episodes go on. But again, not only is it surface level, but I mean, as you kind of go deeper, we're definitely seeing some parallels just 4 episodes in. Our next email comes from Leah. She writes, "Good podcast, guys. Thanks for not using the word meta every other sentence." Apparently, there's another podcast that does that. I don't know who it is. Quick thought on the timeline jumping. It's been put out there that William can't be the Man in Black from 30 years ago, since Delores sees the old Man in Black, then stumbles into Logan and William's camp. This implies that if Delores is remembering the older Man in Black, then she can't immediately walk into the young Man in Black's camp. However, who says her stumbling into the camp follows that scene from the barn. Is it possible that whatever incident happened 30 years ago in the park also involved Delores, and as a result, she stumbled off into the night to find William, who she thinks is the young man in black, and Logan? The park then fixed everything and scrubbed Delores. Now, 30 years later, Delores is having another crisis, and when she remembers Old Man in Black, it is from recent events like days or weeks ago. The two scenes could have been delivered back to back to throw us off to the fact that William is indeed the younger version of Man in Black. Also, on a completely different train of thought, I'm also not sold that Logan isn't the Man in Black. But thanks for reading the rambling, Leia. Guys, what do you think about this?
It's hard to tell. We don't even know yet how we're seeing the story. We don't know if it's a reliable narrator. We could be seeing this through the eyes of hosts. We've already seen scenes that are directly through Dolores' eyes, where we're seeing the glitches. We're seeing her remembering her multiple fathers. I think there will eventually be a play on who's been telling this story to us. And I think that might color everything that we've seen. So it's difficult to tell. But I'm feeling more and more that the timelines is a distraction. It's a sleight of hand. They're trying to get us to focus on that and miss what's really going on underneath. But interesting take.
Thanks, Leah, for writing in. Keep the emails coming. Our next one comes from Ben. He writes, "Hi, guys. First of all, great job on the podcast. I'm loving hearing all the discussions as much as watching the show. I have a far-fetched theory for you to poke some holes in regarding the woodcutter's madness. We know that the wood carving is part of his habit programming to keep him on plot, but the constellation carving is on the back is not. Every night, he makes a new carving and signs it with a constellation, which is a very human thing to do, contemplating the stars and all. As he accumulates more and more carvings, he realizes that every single night he carves the same constellation. Constellations move in the night sky, and Orion is only visible 3/4 of the year. Maybe something in the reveries triggered some knowledge of the stars' constellations, which in turn sparked some deep contemplation, or maybe I'm looking way too deep into things, but isn't that part of the fun? The biggest issue I have with this theory is Elsie telling Stubbs that the woodcutter had no programming about the stars. Maybe she's mistaken, and maybe some earlier programming had him navigate by the stars, so reveries kicking in brought it to surface, or possibly a guest taught to him about it. Keep up the good work, and I look forward to tonight's episode." That comes from Ben. What do we think about the idea that the constellation was brought up by the reveries?
I'm leaning more towards these aren't stars. We're led to believe that it's Orion, and we spotted right away that it was missing either the Orion's sword or his legs. There was an email. I don't know is this the one that had the photos?
We actually have an email coming up that talks about her theory on what the carving is, and it's not a constellation. And we learned in episode 4 that it can't be Orion because Orion's belt only has 3 stars, and the carving on the back of the woodcutter's tchotchkes has 4.
Elsie didn't say that they didn't have the programming to see the stars. She said that hobbies, were part of their anchor of their storyline. So it was something that would be, expected of them to do. I don't think they're stars.
Okay, so if they're not stars, though, the question is, did the reveries create something to where the woodcutter just kept constantly carving in something on the back of all the things that he would create?
No, this could very well be Maeve's version of the sketches that she's hiding in the floorboards. The the woodcutter could be having flashbacks, and instead of doodling and doing his little paper reminders that he's putting, this could be his memories that he's having and his way of reminding him each loop that something is happening.
Pretty cool. Ben, thanks so much for writing in. Our next email comes from George. It's entitled Bone Tomahawk. He writes, "Guys, if you haven't already seen it, watch this movie, specifically Indian roaring sound, enough said." Now, I went to YouTube, and I haven't seen the full movie of Bone Tomahawk. It looks amazing. I can't believe that it wasn't theatrically released because it's kind of like a horror Western. It looks really, really cool, and it has some pretty neat actors in it as well. I pulled some YouTube videos off of it, and darn it if the Indians' roar doesn't sound similar to the roar that we hear of the Wyatt gang from episode 3. We'll post the links up on our website, shatontv.com. But guys, have you seen Bone Tomahawk at all?
I was actually having drinks with a friend, I don't know if it was a year or two ago, and they started talking about Bone Tomahawk, but we were both very drunk, and so I thought they'd just gotten the title of the movie wrong. I said, there is no way there's a movie out there called Bone Tomahawk. And so I kept trying to spin out Western movie titles that I did know to figure out maybe it was one of them that they missed. But in fact, no, it was Bone Tomahawk. Highly recommended to me too, and somehow it just slipped and I never watched it, but it is something that I would like to check out and get back to you on that one, George.
George, thanks for writing in. Next telegraph comes from Greg. It's entitled, Still Sucks to be Teddy. After catching the dissonance theory, there's only one universal truth. It still sucks being Teddy. How's that reckoning going, by the way? Sheesh. Sorry, I was even trying to take notes during the show to come up with something better to write, but there's just so much going on. I think it's hard to know where to start. I am curious, I guess, how long Dr. Ford envisioned Teddy being strung up and who exactly was supposed to find him. Assuming he was meant to be assigned to whomever passed by, I think the folks working in cleanup must hate how much extra work Teddy now needs in order to get him back in the loop. Anyway, keep up the good work, and your request for pyrotechnics has been approved. Greg, P.S. Is it too early to start rolling out the hashtag Team Arnold? LOL. That's a great email, Greg. Thanks for that.
Yeah, a lot of people on the website agree with him. We have the poll question of the week was, which host has the worst usual day? And the choices were Teddy, Delores, Maeve, and Clementine. And by far, people think that Teddy. We've had over 100 votes or 100 votes now, and 54% of people think that Teddy has the worst average day. So even though Delores gets raped in the barn, potentially, or by Rebus's gang, they still think Teddy's got it rougher. They would be smart in cold storage to store up maybe like 30, 40 Teddys, because you're going to need them. It's going to take you time to turn Teddy around. You need maybe one or two of, the bartender, a spare Peter Abernathy, but you better buy a bunch of Teddys because you're tearing them up.
But there's one thing that in his email that was a little bit serious that I do want to ask. How did he expect Teddy to get back? In the new narrative, did he put it out there? Did Dr. Ford, in his omnipotent, know-all, crazy genius knowledge, did he know that if he's in fact control of the Wyatt gang, and that's part of his whole new narrative, did he intend for Teddy to be found by the Man in Black?
I don't know. I mean, when hosts seem to get broken off of their loop, they need someone to rein him back in. I don't think this is part of his plan for the Man in Black to find him. Until you die, you stay in the park or you're brought back on course.
I just feel bad that no one was looking for poor Teddy. They're looking for Delores. They're not looking for Teddy. Anyways, great email, Greg. Keep them coming. Our next email comes from Georgia. Georgia from Brisbane, Australia. She writes, Hey guys, I'm back with another tinfoil hat theory. Did you happen to notice that in one of Dolores' flashbacks, she's kneeling in front of her own grave? A grave that clearly has the name Dolores Abernathy carved into it. Pretty freaky, right? Could this possibly mean that she's ventured on the path of self-discovery before? In this flashback, you can tell that her grave is in the cemetery next to a white church, possibly the same white church Dr. Ford has been mentioning, and it looks like the figure standing next to her is the Man in Black. My mind is having a field day trying to decipher what this means. It's shown to us in the flashback, which could mean that a similar storyline to what we are seeing now has already happened. But what if it's a symbol of what's to come for Dolores? Flashbacks were a huge part of the episode this week, and I think they may have a story to tell if you look deeper, considering this is creep-tastic. This is a creep-tastic Easter egg. I'd love to hear your take on it. Keep up the good work. Georgia, she also included a couple of screenshots, stills from the episode showing the white church and Dolores over the gravesite. We'll post this again on Westworld Telegraph on ShatOnTV.com. Guys, we talked about this in the Instacast. We talked about this on the Deep Dive the Deep Dive cast. Now we're hearing it from listeners. What do we think about that scene of the flashback, her in the cemetery, and also the steeple?
What's interesting is the prominence of the church in town. We don't see organized religion in the current iteration of Westworld. But more interesting to me is the graveyard. What's the need of the graveyard? Because, there are the hosts aren't going to be dying and being buried. It seems like it's a large group. It seemed like maybe there was like 40 headstones, 50 headstones. I'm curious about the graves, what they mean. Sure, you could have the graves be key to the narrative that, the town folk have, reverence for their ancestors who have passed. It's very possible that the grave and all the tombstones are going to, for us, to be marking some event, something that happened. I can't imagine launching the park with that large of a cemetery. You're taking up too much real estate.
I mean, there's always the possibility too. We noticed that the steeple in the church kind of matched the black steeple in Nowhere Land. But when you think about it, there is the possibility that we keep calling this a flashback, and it might not be a flashback. In fact, it might be a warning or something that's being, shown to her as either a self-fulfilling prophecy, or that someone is messing with her head from the outside, that is being tampered with, essentially. Maybe some sort of communication with the little girl in town or whatever, that's basically showing her something that's supposed to scare her, or, because for us, we see it as a flash, right? But for her, who knows, if I had a flash during a daydream of my own grave, I might think about that for a while afterward. And so I'm not so convinced that it's a flashback, most likely, but it's important to keep your mind open and go, what else could this be?
Georgia from Australia, thank you so much for writing in. And again, we'll post that for our listeners. You can comment on that on ShatOnTV.com. Our next email comes from Alyssa. She writes, first, I want to thank you guys for hosting an epic podcast. I've been listening to you guys since day one of Westworld, and you've truly enhanced my watching experience. My boyfriend and I watched last night and spent a good hour analyzing all that transpired. I started listening to your Instacast this morning, but I'm saving the rest for my drive to work, so you may have already covered some of the following that I mentioned below. This episode really unveiled a lot of the secrets we've already speculated, in addition to the havoc that's undoubtedly going to occur. A couple things we noted and wanted to get your opinion on. First, the maze. I noted that the maze has a human in the center of it, as it's seen on the skull the man in black carries, in addition to the depiction drawn by the little girl in the village. At this point, we aren't sure what the maze looks like in the park, but the drawing shows a man in the middle. I have thoughts about this man representing Arnold. While it has been mentioned that Arnold has died in the park, I wonder if he still exists in a different life form. Perhaps the person in the maze drawing is Arnold, and to reach Arnold would unlock the host, allowing for consciousness and the ability to kill. Just a thought. Her second theory. My boyfriend pointed out that Ford and Teresa met at a restaurant either inside or on the outskirts of the park that does not match the theme of Westworld. We wonder if perhaps this restaurant was actually in Roman world. As a nod to the original Westworld movie, Teresa mentions that she had sat at the same table with her family as a child. The restaurant looked deserted, in a sense, and far removed from the action at Westworld. Do we think Roman world may make an appearance on the TV show? Thanks so much for making this incredible show last the full week with your insights and multiple podcasts. Keep them coming. Alyssa. So first, the maze, guys. What do we think about the man being Arnold in the middle?
I've said I had a crazier idea. I like that. I think it's the symbol in the center is that either man or there is one person at the center of it all. That if you find it, I believe, it could very well be Arnold. It could be a call to actually free himself. And this is a stretch. But if Arnold is somehow the basis of all the hosts, that he is the father or the consciousness that's running them all, this could be a cry for help, to have someone come and find and free him, and thus free all the hosts. It's far, but it's possible.
I will say this. If Teresa's family brought a little girl to Roman World, based on what we know of Roman World from the original 1973 movie, that was some very bad parenting. Very bad parenting. Thanks for the email, Alyssa. Our next email comes from one of our favorite listeners, Jezebel. She writes, "Hey guys, congrats on the big success. You guys must be very chuffed." Which I had to look up. Chuffed means very pleased in England. Well deserved. My brain is about to explode this week, and I have a lot of stuff, so you may not want to read this email on the podcast. Well, too late. Hopefully there's some stuff you can use in your own research. Episode 4 was a pivot episode. It didn't really move the plot forward, but explained a few things and pushed my curiosity onto many others. The most important thing being below, I still believe in William is Man in Black. So I will start with my observations and then move on to theories. In Lawrence's village, when the marshal comes to get her, the girl suddenly isn't there anymore. At that point, I believe she is remembering the first time she came to that town, possibly the first time with William, again triggered by the little girl telling her to remember. Lawrence's daughter appears in her visions wearing at least 2 different outfits. We know that a character is always dressed the same, so if she was dressed differently, then she must have been playing a different character. Please take a look at these 2 screenshots. There's a table on the left when she is with Lawrence's daughter, but not when the marshal appears. In the subsequent shots, it cannot be seen anywhere behind the marshal. I'm still believing in the dual timelines and that William equals the Man in Black, but I'm a silly girl and the heart wants what it wants. On the Man in Black front, he knows Arnold. So remember back after episode 2 when I said that perhaps Logan was Ford's son and William was marrying his daughter? What do you guys think about this picture that she sent?
Yeah, I think it's interesting. The table is definitely gone. I took it as the little girl and Delores are part of that original batch. The little girl in some of the flashbacks, if you pause it, you can see is in the small original town where the church is, the graves. Her outfit tells me that she's part of that narrative as well. Asking, do you remember, shows that they have a shared experience. Going by the pictures, this is a different time, but it is very interesting. I'll need to post these pictures as well.
Thanks, Jez, for writing in. Keep up the emails. Next one comes from AJ in Cleveland. AJ writes, "Hey guys, let me preface this by saying sorry for being so long. We're not going to read the entire email. We're just going to pick out 1 or 2 of these. But the full one will be posted on Chat on TV. Love the show, and I'm really glad there's such an avid following already. Just a couple thoughts. I think the maze is Arnold's final test of these 4 levels of AI consciousness. The only way a host can complete the maze is by achieving all 4 levels of the pyramid that Dr. Ford introduced last episode, the sum of the product of which is free will. At that time, a host will be able to escape the shackles of the program loops inside the park and physically pass through to the real world where they can truly be free. Ford says Arnold had a particularly dim view of humanity and much preferred the hosts. I think Arnold got to a point where he had a greater sympathy for the hosts than he did to the humans, and so wanted to set the hosts free into our world, blurring the line between fiction and reality. This conflict between what is real and what is fake, who is human and who is not, is one of the fundamental themes of the show, and so blurring that line results in great peril for these characters. The maze was Arnold's way of doing that, and I think Ford killed him inside the park before he could let the genie out of the bottle because Ford wanted to maintain his omnipotent power. I think Ford will ultimately become the big villain of the story because he enjoys playing God too much and does not want to relinquish his control by letting the host be free. You'll see that whenever he's in the park, he always wears a black hat. The one time Bernard was in the park, he wore a white baseball hat. By the way, I know you guys said Ford was able to stop everyone at the plantation without doing anything, but you'll see when he unpauses the whole scene, he seems to flick his left index finger. Once again, sorry this is so long, but I actually have a lot more than that that I can't even remember at the moment. Loving the show. Keep it up, AJ. Guys, what do we think about the maze being the final test? I know we talked a couple of emails ago about this, but this whole idea of what's real and what's fake I think is pretty interesting, and the idea that possibly the way that Ford controls it is through hand movement and gestures.
Well, the hand gestures, it's still showing some other connection. His hand gesture can't be seen by everybody. So the hand gesture might just be a natural tick to his thought or his whatever telepathy or some kind of connection he has. So I think that's just a byproduct of his command to have them stop. The maze being the fourth level of consciousness and being a way to kind of set them free, it might possibly be that Arnold had the point where he was becoming sick or where he was losing his mind or whatever accident caused his death, knew that his creations were not ready for the real world. So he could set this maze up as a way that as his creations, his children grew and advanced, that one day they would be ready to take this test. And in that being a method of actually the host not only becoming conscious, but getting out of the park. If he really wanted his creations and children to be free, he would need a way to get them out. So one day they become conscious, they find the maze, and it's a way not only for them mentally to unlock, but also to physically escape the torture that they're experiencing in their daily lives in the park.
I'll take, if we're going to just throw out crazy-ass theories at this point, which is what it sounds like, I'm going to go ahead and take it a step further, and let's go a dark angle. Let's say that this maze is like Logan's Run. Let's say that this is a trap, and when a host has gone too far in its consciousness, it's like it's the way that you catch them and put them out, right? It's the way you free them of their consciousness. You free them from that the weight and the torture of that consciousness by putting them out of their misery.
I really like that. That is the final safety protocol. When the hosts get too dangerous that they're going to take over the master, this is like that trap. You bait them into it. You let them, you tease them with free will, and then when they get to the point where they're actually questioning it, bam, you catch them. So it's not just one line of code protecting all the workers from being chopped to bits.
If HBO's learned anything from Game of Thrones, is that they can keep us watching another season by just killing off all our favorite characters. But they got to take it. They got to be sure not to go Walking Dead far.
Thanks so much, AJ, for writing in. Again, AJ had a lot more in his email that he wrote. That'll be on Shat on TV, Westworld Telegraph. Our next email comes from Ashley, and this is the one, Big D, about the Orion constellation. She writes, "Hey, guys, great work on the podcast. I am loving Westworld so far, and I'm relishing the chance to put on my tinfoil hat each week. Here's a theory that I developed during episode 3 that I have not heard anyone else discuss yet. When Elsie and Stubbs find the carved statues in the woodchopper's tent, the show quickly throws out the red herring that it is carved in the likeness of the Orion constellation. As someone with a vague knowledge of astrology, I immediately questioned the premise, given that it doesn't resemble Orion much at all. It did, however, instantly call to mind another image that we have seen repeatedly on the show, the punch holes that feed through the player piano each morning in the saloon. This piano has been featured prominently in each episode, and we already get the sense that the piano starting up each morning is related to the start of each character's activation and loop. What if the player piano is the central computer on site in Westworld that is literally reading out that day's code to the hosts? And what if the woodchopper's carving is actually illustrating an essential line of code, the one that keeps the host from hacking everyone else apart, and is literally connecting the dots on how to dismantle this code, thus freeing all the hosts from the slavery of their daily pre-programmed loops?" Meaning the carving that he wrote, that he carved on the tchotchkes. Would love to hear your thoughts. Ashley from Silver Spring. Wow, this is a pretty and she put some screenshots that we'll post on the website. Big D, Gene, your thoughts on this theory?
This is definitely not the player piano code, but it is something, it is their form of Maeve sketching. We'll see one day. One day we're going to see a scene and we're going to recognize exactly what that is. But it's not stars. It is from some of the flashbacks. A good thought. I like the similarities.
Yeah, we've had other emails write in and say that the code that's even playing on the player piano doesn't even match up to the pop songs that it's playing. But Ashley, I thought this was a really good observation, although I don't think that it's exactly the same. But anyway, thanks for writing in and keep it coming. Next one comes from Vic. This is a funny one, guys. He writes, "Discovered your Westworld podcast. Stop. Confused about At the Movies names. Stop. I listen to your theories. Stop. I plan on continuing to subscribe. Stop. Okay, I think you get my joke. Stop. He goes on to write, it's actually a bit sad because after Dissonance Theory, I'm about 50% more likely to bail on Westworld before season's end. I hope the show rights itself as if for no other reason I can continue to listen to your delightful podcast. I'm a deep diver, and yet 10 minutes into the show, I was utterly confused by the absolute deluge of exposition that was dumped upon us. So many new mysteries and wrinkles to existing mysteries and vague threats some characters are making and discovering stuff under the floorboards and single flame flashes of memory. Exhausting. While on the surface, that should feel exciting and the show apparently has this level of detail and puzzle work at play, I find it soul-crushing. As one friend of mine put it, Westworld really decided to give ammo to every theory out there this week. It just felt like they were putting off as much stuff out there as they could, and we're going to worry about tying it in later after they see what sticks. Lost did this, and I hate it now for it. There's a line in the movie shows like this, Abrams, Nolan mystery boxes, where the mystery has to remain the figure outable, even if you don't put in dozens of hours of research in between episodes. It should help if you put that kind of time in, but everything you need to solve the mystery should be on the screen. For Westworld, it probably is all on the screen, but there's just too much stuff going on. There's just too much stuff coming at us to keep track without all the charts and Reddit threads. It's like we've gotten a whole season of Lost info revealed to us already. Anyway, I'm not giving up on the show yet. Maybe Ed Brubaker is just a terrible TV writer, but Westworld is on notice. So, a few stray theories while they're still in play. This show is all about God complexes. That's nothing revelatory. But I think where many theorizers are missing the boat is looking at it too strictly. I think Westworld is talking about all gods and deities and masters and subjects and slaves and followers. It's a mishmash of too many to count. For example, I think Dr. Ford is God, but not just God. He's more like a cross between God and Zeus. He's not the benevolent God of the Bible. He's the hyper-controlling God that anti-religious types like to paint God as. This is a God who wants his creations to obey, but he also wants them to choose to obey him. It's a God without love. I think that the specific model for Ford is the God of the story of Job, one who allows things to happen to his creation in order to prove that in spite of everything, the creation will still love God. Bernard, by way of Arnold most likely, is the Satan that Ford has allowed to exist in Westworld. Bernard, like Lucifer in his snake form, wants to offer God's creation free will, meaning knowledge, to be made equal to God. But Bernard isn't the evil version of this mindset. He's the hero, more the Paradise Lost version of Lucifer without the grandiosity. Dolores is Eve, and Bernard is continuing to offer her the taste of the apple. Looking ahead, I think that Ford is planning on introducing religion into Westworld, as it's been posited by others. I think we're going to have something that looks not unlike the story of Jesus. I think Ford has been creating the child robot and implanting him with his own memories, but none of the knowledge. At some point, probably the season finale, Ford will die, but it will be revealed much later on that he placed his consciousness into the child robot. This will represent God coming to live among his creations like he did in the form of Jesus. Jesus Ford will be the entity who leads the host into enlightenment and self-awareness and gives them a reason to think beyond just their Westworld existences. However, this will be a dark existence. It won't be a kindly Lord, but one who demands much of them to keep them in order. Okay, that's all for now. I'll stop. Vic, what do we think about Ford being Jesus?
I was with you, Vic. I really love the first half of this email where you basically said, hey, they're throwing a bunch of crap at us. There's too many theories flying around. The show needs to slow down and be figure outable. And I was like, man, this guy is right on. He said everything I'm thinking. Let the show, settle into its own weight. Let's see some acting here. Let's see some story development. Let's start caring about some characters. And then came the theories, and holy crap, I think you just bought into every piece of evidence that is put out there. Jesus Ford and the Garden of Eden all over again and every deity being represented. I'm not with you on that. I really want everybody. I'm with you on the being ready to jump ship on this show. But man, people need to just get a hold of themselves, please.
Yeah, I don't know if Ford as the Jesus angle will come. I think it might be more Dolores is leading the rest of the hosts out, but who knows? I mean, listen, as an avid watcher of Lost, I thought that show was going to go one way, and then it veered right. So it could happen here. It could, but
HBO has to be careful. I was burned by Lost, like many, where we were promised answers from the beginning, and it turned out in the end that it was all a lie. That they had not mapped it out, and they were stumbling around in the dark. They kept introducing mysteries without answering any. HBO needs to be careful, and they have to start giving us some clear answers without just layering on more questions. If it goes another couple episodes like this, I think they might be in danger of losing some viewers.
I mean, look, here's the deal. I'm sitting right next to a bookcase right now. Okay, I look over to my left. I got Anne Rice, Interview with the Vampire. Okay, just schlock. Okay, I could take that and I could say, you know what, Westworld is actually just talking about Interview with the Vampire, right? So there's Lestat, and he goes and he's kind of lonely. That's like Ford, and so he goes and he creates Louis, which is Bernard, but Louis is not behaving correctly, right? And he wants to keep Louis in the fold, so they go and they get Claire, the little girl, which is really represented by Dolores. That's his little girl vampire that's going to keep him a part of the family. Look, it all just lines up, guys. Can't you see it?
So what you're saying is that's our blog post this week. Is
you can apply any fucking book, is what I'm saying.
Westworld is Interview with the Vampire by
yes,
Anne Rice.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, that's the best theory I've heard thus far.
Thank you.
Yeah,
and they're all immortal. You see, that's what they just realized. They're immortal, but they could just, but they can't hurt you as long as you stay inside.
As long as you don't invite them in.
That's right.
We have a large audience in Los Angeles. I think that Gene might be having a possible career change here.
Vic, thanks for writing in. Again, Vic gave a lot more theories that we'll post on the Westworld Telegraph on our website, shadontv.com. Next one comes from Sam. He's from Boston. Hey, guys, love the podcast and wanted to share my guest host theory. The guests in the park are also hosts, which are being subjected to a Turing test. The test is being unknowingly performed by the park staff and masterfully orchestrated by Dr. Ford. These special guest hosts are similar to the park hosts in that they are made to believe that they are real, but their implanted backgrounds are of a world outside the park. The guest hosts also have the awareness that the park hosts are not real, while the park hosts believe everyone is real. The guest hosts have special privileges, feelings of invulnerability, can't be shot, etc. The ultimate purpose of the guest host experiment is for Dr. Ford to develop the next generation of advanced hosts, which pass the Turing test and are indistinguishable from human. Bonus variation, the park staff are also hosts, and the entire park is one giant host social experiment by Dr. Ford. Thoughts? Sam from Boston.
This is bullshit. He's trolling us. He's trolling us. Not everybody's a host. We're host. You're host. I don't want to think about any more hosts. This is a troll. He's playing with us, isn't he?
I don't know. Is he? Is he trolling?
I think that someone's watched like one too many episodes of St. Elsewhere, right? Where like at the end it's just like, or the Newhart show or whatever, right? Yeah. I really hope we're being trolled. But although, I mean, again, oddly more plausible than some of the stuff I've heard, And I blame HBO for this. I really do, because they made this show. Remember when we first started watching this show, we were like, this is going to be about action and sex and violence and really good storytelling. And now it's just become like Mystery Palooza. Did you imagine, guys, that we were going to be doing a conspiracy show when this all started out?
I thought we were going to do maybe one show a week, maybe an Instacast. Now it's the Instacast, the big show, and then 2 hours of reading theories and responding to them. That's what this show has become. But, I mean, listen, we wouldn't have a podcast. I mean, you can't have a podcast, reviewing Big Bang Theory, can you? So, I mean, in some ways, the whole reason for all these theories and craziness is the fact that we have, you know, a podcast. So I don't know. It's a double-edged sword is what I'm saying.
I do apologize in the sense that, you know, you guys can't see us right now. We can see each other, and the listeners can't see us. So there are smiles on all our faces. We're not mad at you. And in fact, I'm very entertained by some of these. And a lot of it is very, very well educated guesses, very astute references to theology and literature. I'm not, by any means, I don't mean to insult the audience, but it's just like, I feel like we're all losing our minds together. And trust me, I spend all week talking about these theories too, but I really just implore everyone to let's just take a deep breath. Let's look at the evidence. Let's see where the show takes us. Let's kind of cool it just a little bit.
I agree, Sam. Thank you. We're not mocking you. We're enjoying it. But it just feels a bit like we're in Crazy Town.
Thanks, Sam, for writing in. Next one comes from Tom. It's a short one. So one question I keep having is, do the hosts have any concept of the fact that the guests cannot be injured? They are always so impressed with the Man in Black, but all he has to do is shoot people up. Like in episode 4 when he gets out of jail. Does that make sense? Tom?
Yeah, I mean, I think from the episode 1, when we see Teddy first shoot the Man in Black, and he's surprised that it doesn't hurt him. I think that at the range that most of them are using firearms, they just assume that they didn't hit, you know, the target. I think it's become pretty evident that either the simunitions have changed or the Man in Black is just particularly impervious to the simunitions. But I think that the hosts do not have a fact that the guests can't be injured.
Yeah, I think that they purposely program the host to be surprised when it doesn't hurt them. So that's just part of their programming. Thanks for writing in, Tom. Keep them coming. Next one comes from Pat. Hey, guys, love the podcast. Keep it coming. The best reveal of episode 4 was Logan's family ownership of Westworld. If that's a flashback to 30 years ago, then probably Logan's company, and William's too, since he's married to Logan's sister, owns a majority stake 30 years later. If William is the Man in Black, then this would explain why he's a VIP guest. Nice twist if this is true. A majority owner of the company that owns Westworld is a player in the game. Of course he gets special treatment. Now, I've heard that an inspiration for the show was the video game Red Dead Redemption, as we've talked about on prior podcasts. In that game, there's a zombie thread, Undead Nightmare. If we assume Arnold is somehow still involved, then maybe he created zombie hosts. Following that logic, since zombies are the undead, zombie hosts couldn't be killed. I'm thinking that's why the hooded hosts are unaffected by the gunshots, both human and host. Bring on episode 5. Pat. Guys, zombie hosts.
I think it's important here to just point out before Dick absolutely eviscerates this one, that the guns for most of the people involved in this, even the humans, they're still using the same guns that the hosts are using. It's the effect on the person being shot that's different. With the exception of the Man in Black, I think all the guns that that the guests are using are the same as host guns. So that would explain why they don't work. They're the same guns.
Zombie hosts. If I see all of the cold storage breaking out and becoming Wyatt's gang, all oily, greasy, veiny, and zombie-like, I don't know that I could take that. I don't know that many people could take that. I don't want zombies. Please, no zombies.
I don't know. Listen, there's some credence to what he's saying, right? Because if those hooded monsters that are part of Wyatt's gang are in fact hosts, why can't they be killed?
Because Gene made it clear. The bullets don't cause the explosion of blood and damage. If that was the case, then it would injure people. It's almost like a squib. We've seen that they have to call in for pyrotechnics. So we know that there is an artificial Hollywood effect to it. It's obvious that the hosts kind of respond to being shot, whether it's the little explosion or they're shot in the arm or the head. We've seen in the breakout with the Man in Black where he shoots one of the guards in the head, his head explodes. There's no way munitions could do that, simunitions. So there is a Hollywood squib effect here. So possibly Wyatt's gang has learned how to turn that off.
Well, guys, just thinking more about this, though, too. I mean, think about when the Woodcutter was down in the crevasse. Stubbs went there and said, hey, we got to get the head off. All I care about is the head. How do you kill zombies? You have to go for the head. The Woodcutter bashed his head off, and he's sitting down there without a head. He can't move anymore. Guys, this is just like zombies.
Oh, absolutely. And something to think about, kind of getting back to the way that the simunitions work too. Remember when Walter is shot and he's got a hole in him and he's drinking milk and it's just pouring out of him, right? The thing to consider with, if you want to talk about zombies, is that with these hosts, them being shot, I think they go down as a self-preservation method. Basically, it makes it easier for the Westworld cleanup crew to patch them back up. If they just kept coming and people kept shooting them, you'd have a lot more damage to clean up, right? So they're not dead. They could still get up and keep going. They're programmed to shut down when they get shot. And once they can override that, now you got a real problem on your hands.
Zombies. Thanks, Pat, for writing in. Next one comes from Aaron, all the way in Louisiana. Hey, guys, can't keep thinking about the part in episode 2 where Dr. Ford asks the little boy if he can see the white church. But later, we see a black church. This immediately reminded me of the white hat, black hat dichotomy, representing basically good and evil. What I'm wondering is, supposing Dr. Ford is a host, is it possible that what he, as a robot, sees as white, we, as the humans' guests, see as black? On one hand, it could suggest moral relativity, where good and evil are in the eye of the beholder. Or could it suggest that Dr. Ford is going down a path which is good for the hosts, but evil for the humans? I am not sure, but I feel that the contrast between what we see and what he sees seems to be, well, black and white. Also, on the theory that Bernard is a host, last night I went back to watch episode 1 again, and I noticed that when Bernard and the guards are in the elevator, they suggest he may want to hang back because of the odor. Do the hosts have a sense of smell? My take on this is either he's not a host, or if he is, the guards are unaware. Thanks for the podcast. Really enjoying it. Aaron, what do we think of the Dr. Ford seeing white and we see black?
I could see that in the sense that, when Dick talks about there being, we never know whose eyes we're seeing through. And in that case, that would be a really interesting paradigm or a very, very interesting prism to see the show through, is that depending on who's viewing the scene would be very different. I don't buy into it, but it's something to think about.
And it's possible that everyone, working there, everyone believes they're human. Delores thinks she's human. So Stubbs and the security team might think, hey, we're human, but he might not be. Nobody's caring. And that room probably does smell. If the hosts are advanced as we are led to believe, they have working sexual organs, I think sense of smell is plausible.
I mean, Clementine clearly has a Rhine detector on her, so I think that, come on.
Seriously, she's willing to give roughly a 20% discount just with a bath. For $4, you save $1 by taking a bath. It's got to be bad. Poor Clementine.
Thanks, Aaron, for writing in. Next email comes from Travis. Travis writes, hey, guys, I am really enjoying your podcast. Thanks for your theories, even the crackpot ones, and for allowing the listeners to participate in this world with their own questions and ideas. For me, Westworld has been a pretty complicated story to follow, and I am by no means stupid. Instead, I am simply unfamiliar with the world, having never actually seen the original movie, and unlike other shows, we are rapidly presented with many events and several characters within 15 minutes of the first episode. This last episode added even further complexity. Having rewatched the episodes a few times, I'm developing a theory that I want your opinion on. The company's motives are yet to be uncovered. The term "the company" is such an abstract description of this business that it elicits the notion of an evil corporation bent on control and monopoly. However, what if the company's motive is altruistic? As society progresses, healthcare has grown rapidly as one of the premier industries of our world. Couple that with our view of this being a futuristic society, and you could have the possibility of immortality and or the ability to interact with deceased loved ones as the ultimate goal of the company, much like other sci-fi fantasy stories have focused on cryogenics. People are living longer, healthier lives, that it's possible that we will eventually hope to completely conquer death and even test the possibilities of resurrections. Let me state that I am not sold on this theory, nor do I believe that this is a solid concept backed with specific evidence. I am just interested in hearing your thoughts and speculations on the matter. Best, Travis. Guys, what do we think about that?
I would just ask, why the Wild West? Like, why go through this big charade of having, the Ouroboros and self-cannibalization and Odyssey on the Red River and, scalpings and shootouts and chaps and horses and all that shit, if your purpose is altruistic, if your purpose is to develop thinking beings that you can convert your consciousness into, if your purpose is to find immortality, why go through the charade?
They mentioned that there's multiple layers of what's going on in intentions. That Wild West theme park could be just a shell. It could be the facade. And what's going on underneath is they're using the park as a means to advanced AI. You put them in these real world situations, they advance faster. But the question here about healthcare is going to one day bring us to an interesting question. As we prolong human life and as we cure diseases, we're going to have to deal with that dirty little issue of population growth. And in this future where health has advanced to the point where they can almost stop any kind of disease, I'm scared to see what kind of population control is in place. It's going to be dark days.
If we want to get into that, I would point out that in every industrialized society, as their healthcare improves, their birth rates actually decline. It's the two go hand in hand. The places we're going to have the highest growth rate in humans is always going to be in the poor, undeveloped areas. So really, we could have a society where we just have a static population, which would be rad.
Thanks, Travis, for writing in. Next one comes from Daniel. Daniel writes, "Hey guys, great podcast. Here's where I'm currently at with the central narrative that's driving Westworld. What do you think? Have you heard this elsewhere? Delores will lead the hosts to freedom." He goes on to write, "Arnold was obsessed with giving the host consciousness. Anthony Hopkins, Dr. Ford, opposed Arnold's dangerous path. So he wrote the foundational do no harm code we see in Westworld today. This disagreement was the unraveling of their partnership. But Arnold buried code deep within the host that would activate long after his death that would lead the hosts to freedom, which starts with Delores. And this show is ultimately her journey, as she describes the Judas cow leading the other hosts to freedom. Knowing Delores is the key to Arnold's master plan, Arnold had to do everything he could to make sure Delores remained safe. So he created Bernard, a protector in the real world to keep her safe. And in the game, hint, that Bernard is a host in the opening credits when we see a robot playing the self-piano, a machine controlling a machine. The big aha, freedom equals death. Delores is leading the other hosts to true freedom, which is death. Not the death they currently have, being brutally murdered or raped or getting fixed by the staff and then thrown back into circulation over and over. For hosts, immortality is a nightmare. They're stuck in a never-ending loop of abuse. Freedom for them is finally slipping away into a quiet, peaceful nothingness, and Delores will help them get there. She's on a mission she doesn't know she's on, set into the motion by the code Arnold left behind. The Judas cow leading the hosts to the slaughterhouse to escape Westworld in a peaceful nothingness forever. I thought you might like to look into the Native American story of the Atoy. It is represented as a circular maze, usually with a stick figure. Full story available is online, including Wikipedia. It is commonly referred to as the man in the maze. This is what I believe is transcribed in the interior surface of Kissy's skull and fits in with the thread of a search or perhaps a mythic odyssey of the Man in Black. Take a look, and she posted a photo that we'll again post on our website. P.S. I've listened to multiple Westworld podcasts, and you have come up as my number one. I particularly enjoy your ability to tie the details to larger meanings, themes, or Westworld history. Thank you for your efforts, and I apologize. That actually came from Heather, not Daniel. That came from Heather. Heather, thank you so much for writing in. Guys, I'm going to have to agree with her theory on this. What are your thoughts?
Well, I mean, if I could break it down into a two-parter, I don't agree necessarily on the whole, again, Arnold bearing the code deep inside of them and all of that. Regardless of that, though, I do believe in the freedom equals death. I do believe in the fact that I think we've established that, there is a horror, there's a moment where Maeve is kind of, put in touch with her immortality, and it's a realization that each of them is going to have to make, and what that means to each host, being brought back to life again and again. It makes you able to live forever, but what kind of an existence is it? Would death be preferable? Regardless of all of that, though, very, very astute with the man in the maze pointing that out. And we'd mentioned before in several episodes, both of you, Raj and Dick, had pointed out that you recognized this drawing from something before, and that you've seen it before. It is, I think there is a very strong key there. Again, looking at hard evidence that we have that the show is trying to tell us something here. It's something to key in on and keep in mind while watching future episodes. So huge kudos to Heather for pointing that out and giving us something to go on.
Next one comes from Josh. He writes, Paradise Lost was the first thing that came to my mind when watching Westworld, so I was stoked when you mentioned it on Telegraph 103. I wondered who was Lucifer and who was Eve. They're the two most dynamic characters in Milton's work. God is a static douchebag. The thesis of Paradise Lost is to justify the ways of God to man, so I'm thinking about that in the context of Westworld. One other thing is that if William is indeed the man in black at a younger age, then it would mirror Lucifer as the angel of light turning into Satan, the complicated monster, fallen and lost from his center as the man in black is looking for the center of the maze. You guys are awesome. I'm enjoying the podcast. Keep it up. And there is no way with J.J. Abrams that we are seeing different times. With him, time is a character like in Shakespeare's Winter's Tale, exit pursued by polar bear. Josh. So what do we think of Man in Black as being Satan, Lucifer from Paradise Lost? Gene, you're our literary expert.
I'm still banking on Bernard really being the Lucifer character, bringing knowledge to the humans. I mean, again, but to me, all humans are demons. If we're following Paradise Lost, in that case, Bernard could not be. I do believe that Bernard is AI, and if that's the case, then Lucifer would have to be a human in this, or a guest, or someone who's a quote unquote real person to follow that. I don't see it as the Man in Black though, although he is human, and so that would follow that trajectory and that philosophy.
Thanks for that, Josh. Next one comes from Josh, another Josh. He writes, "Dear Bad Hombres," from the debates. Nice.
Yes.
First, I would like to say that I thought the fourth episode was the best episode by far. I realize this opinion will make Gene and Big D look down on me, but it can't all be subtly and nuanced. Sometimes something like this has to happen. I also want to say that it's going to be a shame when part of the maze is in a mine shaft to trick people to thinking that the maze is a physical location, and poor Gene gives up on the whole show because of it. Disclaimer, I am not trying to kill Gene here. I love Gene. Quick aside, when Dolores tells Bernard, "I think I want to be free," in the start of the episode, that was one of the most chilling moments so far. In one sentence, you can tell she is willing to do almost anything to achieve that freedom. Evan Rachel Wood is killing it. Okay, so as I reviewed this before I sent it, I started to have my doubts about this theory, but here we go. I think the Man in Black is the owner of Delos, and that he uses his influence to mask his importance inside the park so he can play like a regular guest. Part of that is having people like Stubbs know who he is and deflect the other employees away from him. This is based on his alluded to important as a guest. He gets whatever he wants. His financial capability to go to the park so often. And his showdown with Ford, shown in the preview next week. Ford's conversation with Teresa at the Hacienda that sets up the company providing financial backing to Westworld or Moneymen, in which Man in Black in this theory embodies as Ford's antagonist, to Teresa in regards to Delos and here we and Arnold were gods and you merely are guests. I think Also, that Logan is related to Man in Black, possibly his son or nephew, and he's there on a covert inspection of the park and is using his bachelor party trip with William as a ruse. But Ford, who tells Teresa, we know everything about our guests, don't we? As we know everything about our employees, knows his ulterior motive and has arranged things via the Slim Miller host to take Logan down a certain path. Logan's mission may even be an attempt at the Man in Black by distracting Ford from what he's up to because he knows Ford will want to manipulate the world around Logan. What he's trying to do is unlock the core of the maze to give the host free will and enable them to kill humans. After that, the risk he needs to feel truly alive in the park will be there and it will never leave. Josh, P.S., you're my boy, Gene.
Well, thank you, Josh. I appreciate that. I'm glad you're looking out for my welfare. I love you too. I agree that scene with Dolores and her actually expressing of her own will, presumably that she wants to be free, that she thinks she wants to be free, was a chilling moment. I don't know if the Man in Black is the owner of Delos, but he could very well be that representative that's spoken of in the meeting between Dr. Ford and Teresa. He could be there to kind of check things out, whether he's using that as a ruse or if that's actually his intent while he's there. I don't know, but there is that possibility. As for Logan, it is interesting that you point this out. You know, he calls William out for saying, "Oh, well, they know exactly what you're looking for, and that's why they sent you." Dolores, and this is them trying to keep you engaged, and then doesn't notice that they're doing exactly the same thing with him, perhaps with the Slim Miller storyline. So really good observations there, and I'm not just saying that because you love me.
Yeah, and don't think we would ever look down at you. We love our listeners. We would never look down at you. But for us to believe that the Man in Black is somehow either the owner or high up in the company, we would have to believe the fact that he is willing to play a 30-year endeavor into the park, into the game. A powerful man such as we know the Man in Black is, that's difficult to believe. If he has access to the actual inner workings of the park, he would be able to find the nature of the maze, he'd be able to solve all of these mysteries. He wouldn't need to spend 30 years in the park. And because of that, I believe he has no background knowledge. He's just a normal guest.
Thanks, Josh, for writing in. And Gene, you've got your favorite listener there. Next one comes from Antonio. Antonio writes, guys, great job on the multi-piece podcast. It's as complex and interesting as a podcast about a show like this should be. Nice. About the Dolores-Bernard relationship, have you guys noticed that on episode 4, Dolores uses the exact same words as Bernard did on episode 3 about how their father and his son are dead. Pain is the only thing they have left of them. It would have been uncanny that they both would have had said the exact same words about that. So must we conclude either he inserted those words into her story or that they share something deeper? Thoughts? Thanks, Antonio.
Bernard asks her, where did that come from? Did we put that in you, was the question. Dolores says that it was encoded in her and she took some liberties with it as well. Bernard's reaction was kind of surprised because I think he remembers saying almost that exact same thing. Almost as if he's had a self-realization that, that sounds a bit familiar. I've thought that, I've said that. So this could be the potential first step that maybe Bernard is realizing. It's a bit strange that she would say exactly what I had said.
I think this is just more evidence that Bernard is a host.
But the question then is, does Bernard realize he's a host?
No, I don't think he does.
And that's why this that's why this conversation is his first clue that, I could possibly be a host.
Either that, or we're seeing two different Bernards. I think we could either be seeing... I think in the episodes or in the instances where Bernard is talking to Dolores and Dolores is fully clothed, that's Arnold appearing to her as Bernard. In the scenes where she's naked and there's other people around, that's the true Bernard.
I agree, and I'm going to reference a terrible movie that probably Gene's going to lose his shit. was Contact with Jodie Foster. Okay. Have you seen it, Gene?
I have.
Okay. Terrible movie. But in the movie, there's the interesting concept that this, it's about humans creating a machine that allows them to contact alien life. And when they do meet alien life, the aliens take the form of Jodie Foster's dead father, which is, it was terrible, anticlimactic.
Spoiler alert.
Spoiler alert. But it's an interesting concept that if you were the subconscious and you wanted to communicate with a person, you would take a form that they were comfortable with, a form that they have knowledge of, someone that they've seen. So it would make sense that all of the conversations, if it is some form of subconscious that Bernard is in there, or Arnold, would take the form of Bernard. That way Dolores isn't alarmed. It's a dream. It's someone she knows.
I mean, that makes sense, except for the fact that Bernard is having a struggle. He is going through all of this stuff. It's not, he has turmoil that's very visibly displayed on the screen. It's just, again, going with the weight of the evidence. I would say that, although all these meetings might not be in person, although some parts of these might be subconscious, and although there could be a lot of other powers at work here, the fact is that there is a Bernard, and that Bernard is struggling with some stuff, and he seems to be struggling in these conversations. So it seems like it's the same consciousness of Bernard, at least.
Thanks so much for writing in. Great answers there. Our final email comes from Fabio from Florida. He writes in, "Hey guys, wanted to start off by saying that I've been massively enjoying your podcast so far. I've started listening on Monday and I'm catching up now. I still haven't heard your episode 4 review, so this might already be stated, and I didn't even bother looking for another podcast. I gotta admit, I wasn't really sold on the whole separate timeline bit with Will Logan's story. However, after episode 4, I'm starting to see some more evidence to this. We saw Logan go out of his way to pick up a better revolver, possibly foreshadowing the idea of weapon upgrades in the park that might eventually lead Will to getting the Man in Black's pistol. And here's a couple of other ideas. I wanted to share a crackpot theory about Teddy. So I can agree that Teddy is Will, maybe Logan's consciousness, downloaded into a host, but I have 3 separate ideas about the situation. William downloaded himself into Teddy, leaving his old body, thus possibly making Logan the Man in Black. Number 2, William downloaded a copy of himself to Teddy, but went on living to become the Man in Black. Number 3, William became the Man in Black. Logan had a change of heart for Dolores at some point and became Teddy. Or, the final one, this is going to be like Superman 3, and the good part of William goes into Teddy while the bad part remains the Man in Black. But honestly, at this point, I kind of ruled this out since Man in Black is starting to show his colors more and might be more of a good guy than we anticipated, especially with him apparently knowing about Arnold now. Still, this would be awesome to call that now and have that come true. Granted, I would probably be massively disappointed in this show. Anywho, I'm really sorry for taking up so much of your time. Hopefully no one's brought this up yet. Either way, keep up the fantastic work, guys. I'll listen to episode 4 tomorrow on the ride home. Fabio from Florida. P.S. The hour-long timeline works perfect because generally that's how long it takes for me to get to work with traffic in the morning. It's also the right amount of time to get good in-depth analysis, but not start rambling on too long. You guys are great. First of all, I think he's the first and maybe the only listener to compare Westworld to Superman 3.
Well, was Superman 3 the Richard Pryor computer, or was this Bizarro Lightning Superman? Which one was it?
I think this is the Superman where Superman gets drunk. And
well, it's a kryptonite dust, wasn't it? Possibly
rapes someone? Doesn't he sexually he pulls a whole Donald Trump on that woman, right?
We got to go back. I hope it's not the Quest for Peace.
Superman 3 is the Richard Pryor one.
Oh God, that one was awful.
Yeah, it's pretty bad.
With a giant the computer that shoots lightning.
Yeah, he
Richard Pryor's the data entry guy who somehow is a genius computer scientist.
There's a synthetic kryptonite and it splits him in 2.
And he starts fights.
Right, there's good Clark Kent and there's a bad Man of Steel that's separate.
And they have that horrible final battle at the trash compactor.
Is it a trash compactor?
Yeah, they're at a junkyard.
Right.
And bad Superman picks up Clark Kent and throws him into the compactor and thinks it's over. And then, Clark Kent comes out and they have a final fight. Yeah, that's it.
Jeez, spoiler alert for Superman 3. Yeah, so what do we think of? I mean, we've heard this before with other listeners, this idea of downloading into, other hosts and of these four possibilities, what do you think is the most likely, if at all?
Oh gosh. They all have the word download, or in them. I guess I just don't know why anyone would be like, hey, here's a great idea. I'm going to download my consciousness into a host, which is like literally the most abused thing that ever existed. Why the hell you would want to do that? What's the advantage? What's the point?
I want to see at the end of the Westworld, in the final episode of a 5-run season, I want to see a young Man in Black, whoever that turns out to be, fight his older self, Man in Black, near a trash compactor in like the cold storage of Westworld. I definitely am hoping for and putting my money on a Superman 3 finale.
That would be epic. I'd watch that.
So that concludes all of our listener emails and feedback and crackpot theories for this week on this week's episode of Westworld Telegraph. Remember, you can join the conversation by emailing us hosts@shatontv.com. You can also see all of these theories that we just reviewed in their long-form versions via our website, shatontv.com. Then click Westworld Telegraph. We'll have all the pictures, all the theories, and there's actually a comment section that you can join in the conversation. Don't forget, we do our Instacast every Sunday immediately after the East Coast viewing. We also do a live tweet during that airing. And we release our big podcast every Tuesday. Make sure you download and subscribe via iTunes or on FeedBurner or wherever fine podcasts are found. But every Thursday we release this Westworld Telegraph, and I personally, genuinely, really enjoy interacting with our fans. We hope you guys are enjoying hearing these theories that come directly from the audience, like yourself. On behalf of my two co-hosts, Gene Lyons and Big D, Dick Ebert, this is the Raj saying we'll see you next time here in Westworld.